All aboard, ladies and gentlemen. All aboard the comic book index train. Next stop, Zero Town. Gonna need a lot of sips of coffee to get through this one. Okay, lots to talk about, no time to fix my hair. Of course, folks, we got ourselves the comic book index update for the month of October. And what can I say? This one is a bit of a doozy. Tales of Suspense, number 48. First appearance of Iron Man in his red and gold armor. Very cool, underrated book. And the last book that you guys are going to see in this video, because we got to get into lines, charts, and graphs. You guys know what it is by now. Comic book index update. But of course, before I get into it, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I appreciate it. Helps support the channel, doing all those things. You know, the comic book index videos are the most tedious for me to make. So at the very least, do a channel membership, pick up a copy of Sanity, or do nothing and just enjoy the video. We're here to gather some information, get some points of data so that we can become better, comic book collectors or sellers or investors or whatever you use this video for. But of course, the comic book index is the top 100 sold books per age, silver, bronze, and copper. I take the highest volume of grade, and then that's the one that I count. I take the final sale of each month, aka the market close, and I get all of my numbers from GPA. Now, let us get into this index. Of course, the Silver Age index for the month of September. Last month, we were at the $46,506 range. That was the calendar low of the year. We were right on the brink, flirting with the numbers of December of 2020 when it was 46,105. Well, where do we go this month? Well, from my thumbnail, from my intro, you guys know what happened already. The floodgates opened. My, oh my, did we have a major drop this month for the Silver Age, dropping down to $40,537, less than that of December of 2020. The first time in 3 years that we have actually seen a lower number since the beginning of the COVID bubble boom. My, oh my, how things have changed in a few years' time. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit later on in the video about, seasonality. I mean, this is the month of October. We have seen some trends for October and November of showing lower lows for comic books. And, of course, when we get to the end of the video, I'll show you those charts and we will talk about the bigger takeaways. But let's continue to move forward now and get through each and every age here. If we move forward to the Bronze Age index, of course, in the month of September, we are at the $36,198 range. That also was the calendar low for that of the Bronze Age. Well, where do we go in this month? Well, we actually surprisingly had a little bit of a bounce back up. The Bronze Age did actually okay in October, jumping up to the $37,377 range. But, of course, we can't celebrate too much because that still is the second lowest number that we have seen in this calendar year. I mean, that's still the second lowest number that we've seen in the last 3 years. Perhaps, the last month just went a little too low and there was a little bit of a bounce back. But overall, if you look at the macro trend, I mean, we're still sort of on the slide. So while you could see it as a minor victory, I wouldn't have the premature celebration just yet. But let's move forward now to the Copper Age index so we can round out our three. Last month, we were at the $26,144 range. That actually had a bounce back up from the previous month at $24,000, which was the calendar low. Well, where do we go this month? Well, much like the Silver Age, we bounced right back down to $23,995. This also is the calendar low and the last 3-year low for this index as well. So on a whole, if you compare the charts side by side, while the Bronze Age did have a little bit of an uptick, I mean, it's still the second lowest month we have seen in the last 3 years, effectively making this entire month for the entire index aggregate the lowest month we have seen in comic books since that of November and December of 2020. So pretty crazy overall. Let's get into the weeds right here before we start to talk about, the bigger takeaways, the more macro things, interest rates, where we are in the economy, things of that nature. For the Silver Age here, September, we are at 46,506. In October, we went to 40,537, a decrease of 13%. That's a pretty sizable decrease. And, when I get into the very, very specifics, we'll talk about what happened this particular month. For the Bronze Age, 36,198 to 37,377, a 4% increase. But again, like we already established, not that big overall, still a low on the year. October of 2023, 23,995 for the Copper Age, a decrease of 10%, also a sizable decrease for a month by month basis. Now, if we go forward here to the key takeaways, this is where you can really get, into the weeds with some of this stuff. Silver book values, we actually saw 22% down, meaning 22 of the 100 books sold for less this month than it did last month. I have to say that in the time that I've been doing this index, 22% is the highest I've ever seen that number be. I think we've had numbers, or we've had months where the number was maybe in the 15%. I think that that's pretty average, that in any given month, you're going to have like 15 up, 15 down, that sort of thing. But 22% was a pretty sizable number, coupled with the fact that only 9% were up from the prior month. And then also we had a 29% non-sale. That is similar to what we had last month, also at the 29% non-sale factor, meaning that there just wasn't enough demand, not enough comic book collectors willing to pull the trigger. Again, these are the top 100 most popular books, so it's not that they aren't available. These books are out there. But as we know, people are being more discerning with what they spend their money on, holding their cash closer to the vest, and just not willing to make those purchases, at least until, say the market turns around. Now, bronze book values, 15% down, 16% up. So actually pretty even. I would say that that's a pretty average month with what you would see. Only 7% non-sale. I mean, the Bronze Age, more books available at all times, generally speaking. So I think that, 7% is going to be a pretty typical number. And this is why you saw a little bit of an uptick this month. Now, if we go to the month by month, this is the one that I think is the most interesting. The cyan line is, of course, the year of 2023. We're looking at October here, and you can see that this is the lowest month that we've had this year. And it is basically just about flirting with that of its 2020 value. I mean, certainly below that of what we saw in December of 2020, also below that of what we saw, when we had a May spike in 2020. You can see that the graph was actually pretty high all the way back then because of seasonality. I always talk about how, the summer months, going into May or April tend to be trending upwards for comic books because typically we've seen sort of a tentpole movie come out around those times. People get excited. People are looking to spend money going into the summer. And then seasonality wise, here in October and November, we always see down months, at least since I've been tracking these graphs. I mean, typically speaking, October, November gets a little bit slower, and then December ticks up leading into the next year, which also, again, starts the trend upward. So it is certainly possible based on this graph. I mean, if we're comparing it to 2022, that November will be even lower than that of this current month. And then maybe December, we can either go sideways or maybe start a trend upwards. And, again, it all has to do with the macroeconomy, what is going on with the interest rates, all of these things that we've talked about before. Very, very boring stuff. But, currently the Fed has the interest rates paused. And I think as long as the interest rates are high, we're not going to have that free flowing money. People's stocks aren't going to be pumping. People don't have that unrealized gains and stuff like that. So they're not willing to pick up comic books. So all of those things matter. And for all those reasons, it's hard to sort of call a bottom because usually a bottom actually occurs when the pivot happens, because usually something in the economy breaks. And that's when, people start to panic, and then the Fed actually has to pivot and start cutting interest rates. And that's when the stock market usually bottoms. But we don't actually know what the correlation between, comic book prices and stock market prices are. If comic books act like real estate, where it's a little bit slower, then it happens after the stock market bottoms, or maybe comics behave a little more like crypto, where it's going to happen before the stock market bottoms. Either way, while this may not actually be the bottom, I am tempted to say that, unironically, so now might be the time to buy, or at least take a chance on a few, grails or bigger books or good deals or opportunities that you see come your way. Now, let's just quickly look at the trend line here. You got to forgive me here on my top of the trend line. I screwed up a little bit with that graph, but the one thing I want to point out is that, we are seeing both indexes, the bronze and the silver, kind of flirting with the lower side of the trend line. Again, this isn't totally drawn to scale. This is just sort of a quick visual. And again, the trend line is always something that, can adjust. I mean, if we start to, go lower and lower and lower, then the trend line will eventually adapt to that of being generally lower. I mean, there's nothing to say that the trend line has to continue to go up. The trend is your friend until it is not. But because we are flirting with the lower end of the trend line, I did want to kind of highlight, this graph, the psychology of the investor. We see that in the despair phase, typically the price deals below that of the mean. It's below the trend line. So I'm willing to say that we are probably in the despair phase, generally speaking. I mean, when you look around the comic book market and you just kind of take like a vibe check of the sentiment that is out there, a lot of people just really, really down on comic books right now. A lot of like scammy econominess going on in the industry, as you guys know, a lot of, tough times for a lot of sellers, people trying to do whatever they can to get a sale. You couple that with, what is going on with the MCU and superhero movie fatigue and just the general sentiment and the negativity around all the Marvel properties and things of that nature, which, again, is another reason why, I think there's so many people in the despair phase, which, I think we have to finish out this video now with the bear and the bull case. You got to go back to that quote of Warren Buffett where he says, be greedy when others are fearful. And while it could go lower, this definitely feels like a time where people are very, very fearful. If you talk to a lot of comic book dealers or collectors or things like that, it finally feels like everybody knows what it is, right? Like there is apathy on hands, there is fear on hand, there is a lot of people being like, yeah, the market's just soft, it's just hard to sell. Sorry, my hair is so distracting here. It's hard to sell, but that might ironically be the time. That might ironically be the time to buy. I mean, especially with the MCU factor. I mean, so many articles coming out, so many videos coming out saying that this is the end and all that stuff. And maybe it is. I mean, I certainly don't know what the future is, but if you're somebody who believes in the long-term future of comic books in general, and you think that this is going to be a hobby that sustains, well, you might be rewarded, for being willing to take some of the gamble and make some of those purchases in this current environment. You might actually be successful with that. I mean, I would say that generally speaking, if you're somebody who's watching this video at this time, in comic book collecting, you're still in it, right? I mean, if you're, especially now, if you've gone, whatever it is, 15 minutes through this video and you're still watching me ramble about comic book indexes, I feel like you're going to do pretty fine over there. You're pretty much a lifer when it comes to this sort of stuff. But it does certainly feel like this is as good a time as any to look at picking up some of these deals. Again, with what's going on with the macro economy, there was not an interest rate hike this last Fed meeting. It's possible that it's going to hike again. A lot of people still think that a official recession is going to come. But one of the interesting things is that the stock market, typically speaking, actually bottoms before the official recession is declared. So effectively, we could actually be at a bottom right now. We just wouldn't know it. But with that being said, as I've been tracking this graph, I mean, the trend is continuing to go down month after month after month. I mean, it's possible that we just quickly turn a corner and everything starts to shoot up again. I mean, I don't know. That's certainly possible. But, when you look at what's currently going on, month after month, the index continues to go down. So there's no reason to suspect that it won't continue to do so. And if we look at previous years, there's always been times when the index has retested some of the values. 2019 retested 2018 values, 2020 retested 2019 values. And now that we got the COVID money out, it feels like 2023 is retesting some of those 2020 values. Now, while the index is going down, if you still look at an individual book by book basis, it does certainly feel like, a lot of these prices of books are still at their 2020 price. I mean, I know that we are below that of the December month, but as you guys can see it from the graph, the December month shot up dramatically. So, if we're taking an average month in 2020, we're still above those prices, generally speaking. And so, again, the model remains, or the formula remains, that, if you can find deals out there for comic books that are being sold around those 2020 prices, you're probably going to be okay overall. I mean, maybe we go even lower, but, it's hard to really say. Now, again, this is just one point of data. I'm not here to say that I can predict the future. I don't actually know if things are going to go up or down. This model is not a perfect system. It's just something that I sort of came up with. And ultimately, I'll refer back to one of the videos I did last week where, our comics, good investments. Should you buy this book? Should you buy that book? Again, all that really matters. Up market, down market, books going up, books going down, whatever the case is. If you buy a book for less than what you end up selling it for, then it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter if the market is going up or down or left or right or sideways or whatever. That's all that really matters. So again, just be careful out there. That was the update for the month of October. Let me know what you guys think about what's going on in comic books. Have you been feeling the apathy and the harder sales out there and people spending less money? Certainly all the LCSs I go to certainly share that sentiment with me. I will be going to Collector Summit this weekend, and I think probably next week I'll have some good videos talking to dealers, do a little end of year update with the people out there. So expect some content there. It'll be good to get a lot of firsthand accounts at that show. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you on the next one.